Alright guys, welcome back to another part in the pressure vessel design series that I'm going through with. And today we're going to go through adding all of the tanks, the helium tank, the Jet A tank, and the liquid oxygen tank. And these models, or the sizing for these tanks can be found in the general meeting notes. So this is what I used for the size, or actually this is what I used for sizing the helium tank. So that gold one on top, and then I made the liquid oxygen and the Jet A tank according to this vehicle profile, where essentially one tank is going to be around 100 inches and the other one's going to be around 63 inches. So essentially what I'm going to show you in this video is how to add these tanks into an assembly, and then actually go ahead and add these flanges along with the piping and the different routing. Because we're going to actually need to send this over to fluids at some point, and get their stamp of approval on this, and see what kind of flow rates we get through the tanks. And eventually I might even try to see if I can do a flow simulation through this series of tanks and see what happens. But to kind of start it and get right into it, I'm actually going to go ahead and create a new assembly. So, and then you guys can kind of just click and follow along, but keep in mind that you guys are going to need to create your own tanks for the other sizing if you want to follow completely along. Otherwise, we can start with just a singular tank here. And so actually, yeah, if we just start with the Jet A tank right here, I'm going to save this as test 2. So essentially some of the basics you're going to have to, well, you should know before getting into this, is that you're actually going to be needing to use an add-in. So make sure that you go up to this options tab up here and make sure that you have your routing and toolbox library added, and added in and loaded up, because we're actually going to need to go ahead and go to the design library, find routing over here on the right hand side, select that. Actually, let me close toolbox. Yeah, so routing, and we're going to want to go to piping. And first, and probably the most important thing, and the first thing that you're going to be using in these designs, are the welding neck flange. So what I would do to get started, and what we're going to have to do, is we're going to have to orient one of these flanges. And I'm actually going to double click on one and open it up for you, so to show you. But essentially what we're going to have to do is mate this edge to the tank up here. And essentially what we'll have to do is then weld this flange to this tank, and then we can connect another flange to it, which is then welded to pipes. And so to pretty much get started from here, what I would do is open a weld neck flange, and then I would go over here to features. Oh no, actually, sorry, I'm in the wrong. I need to be in the assembly. Sorry. So yeah, make sure you go in the assembly, and then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go to flanges. Make sure you have one open. Go to assembly, insert components, find your flange. Welding neck flange right here. Oops, I do not want to take that. So welding neck flange, and then orient it the way you want it. So I'm going to start off on the top of the tank, where essentially this is going to be the interface between the Jet A tank and the helium. And just from your drop down here, make sure that you select your right neck flange. So we're going to be using a 1.5 inch, or at least for now we'll kind of go with that, because what we might find later is that if we take a flange of a certain size, we can always reduce the piping later. But for now I'm just going to pick 1.5. And then what I'm going to do is go ahead and mate it to the top of the Jet A tank right here. And then I'm going to make sure that it's concentrically aligned. So now this flange is sitting on the top of this tank right here. And essentially what we're going to have to do is, when we're assembling it, weld it together right here along this chamfer right here. So from here, to kind of continue going through with your next step, what you're going to want to do actually is pretty simple. Just exit out of any open windows or open sketches you have. And what you're going to want to do is just take your welding neck flange, the one that you double clicked on earlier and opened. What you're going to want to do is just take it and drag it onto your other one. Make sure that you have your correct neck flange again, and then from here, this is where your routing properties for your piping opens up, and where you'll be able to define basically your thickness of your pipe, your type of pipe, your inner diameter. And one thing that's important to note is for piping, the diameters are taken from the inside. A 1.5 inch pipe is usually a reference to the inner diameter, not the outer diameter, so just make sure to keep that in mind when you're looking at or choosing a configuration. But for now, I mean, this defines bend radius and a bunch of other things. Usually these are pretty good. The default sets are pretty good, so just kind of go with those and go ahead and hit OK. From here, what I would highly recommend is that you enter a certain plane that you're going to draw off of. I'm just going to use the front. And the reason is because whenever you use a line, it's actually going to be a 3D sketch. And if you aren't on a certain plane, it might make it difficult to know exactly where you are. So to kind of make things easy, just stick to a plane and use that to draw. And then wherever pretty much you draw, you can see piping adds, and it bends along that certain radius that was defined in that very first window. So that's pretty much the very basic to how you add piping. And what this will do is it'll actually make a walled thickness. So if we exit the sketch right here, it's not actually a solid tube, it's actually a hollow pipe, and this thickness is determined by this the type of schedule of the piping. So that's really cool. But obviously, I do not want my piping to look like this. It's not a drinking straw. So in order to go ahead and edit whatever you place down, the easiest way is probably just right-click on a line and hit Edit Root. From here, you'll be able to go back and take off everything you don't want. And I want to go... Oh, looks like there's no power trim. Cool. Yeah, so just get rid of everything you do not want, and you can actually set and you can use smart dimensions to set dimensions, which is really good. So for now, I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm just going to leave the piping as it is right here for now, because what I'm actually going to go ahead and do is input all the other tanks. Set them the set distances that we kind of came up with, which is 0.6 meters apart, which is around 2 feet. And then I'm going to go ahead and add all the flanges and get back to you guys when I'm ready to start doing all that. Okay, sweet. So once you get all of the flanges in the locations that you want, now we can kind of go ahead and start dragging and dropping these weld neck flanges onto them and start building up the routing. So let's start from the top and we'll just work our way down. So essentially what we're going to do is the same thing as we did before. Grab the welding neck flange, throw it onto this guy, he'll snap on, and he should automatically size to the other one. So just go ahead and do that. Now this is where things kind of get interesting, because this is where we're going to want to add a T-joint. because we're going to want a pipe going out this side and going down alongside the vehicle and then back down into the liquid oxygen tank. So in order to do that, let's go over here to T's, straight T. There's probably better models for this, and it won't be a square T. We might even have to model our own connector and throw it in here. But essentially, this is going to be the really easy way, and it's kind of a placeholder that we can use for now. So just grab your straight T, bring it up, and put it on the point that you want, essentially. And so I'm just going to put it directly onto that point. Make sure 1.5 schedule 40, the same as everything else. And then from here, you can see that it creates two new paths, essentially a tube going out to the right and a tube going down. So what we're going to want to do is, what's actually kind of cool though, is before you define anything, because nothing is defined with smart dimensions, you can actually drag your T-joint around, and you can actually drag these points to change the lengths of the pipings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this there, and I'm going to connect this pipe to the other pipe just by dragging it and snapping it to the other point. So now these lines, essentially when we go ahead and make or leave this 3D sketch of this piping, these pipes will be connected. So that's really a nice and easy way to connect routings together. Now for the next part, what I would want to go ahead, whoa, SolidWorks, what are you doing? What are you doing there, bud? Alright, anyway, so from here, what I'd recommend is, sometimes I have issues when I try to add too many reference dimensions and splines and things like that I want to shape the piping off of. So what I do is just kind of create a rough sketch of what I'm looking for, and then I'm going to go back in, add some center lines, and you'll see why I'm doing this in a second, because now you can define your pipe angles, and depending on what type of fluid is coming through these pipes, you're going to want a certain angle. But for helium doesn't really matter too much. It's more of a liquid oxygen thing, because you can get an explosion risk from turning corners too fast, which is not good at all. So what I'd recommend is just, for now, for helium, I don't really know. I'm just going to go over something, because this is well, that's a 90-degree turn right there, so that's okay. But here, let's just go with 55. As you can see, it just shrunk it back into there. Oops. You know what? I guess it doesn't really matter for now, but you can see is that's how you can go ahead and modify your angles. And another thing that I want to mention is that you're going to want to define the outside of the vehicle. So this is essentially, since these are structural tanks, they're going to be right alongside the edge of the vehicle. So that means we're going to want our piping to be just a little bit offset from that, and then we're going to have some kind of connector for it. So I'm picking an arbitrary value of 1.5 for now. I don't necessarily know if that's correct or what. Oops. Yeah, and as you can see, you can drag points around to kind of shape it how you want. But for now, let's just leave it at this. It's kind of beside the point. We can mess around with trying to make it look nice and flow more even later. But essentially, what I want to do is leave a little space in between the side of the vehicle and the pipe, so then we can add pipe connectors, and then later on we're going to have a hood or something that, or a raceway that covers these pipes. But essentially, that's good for now. We'll leave this guy like that, and to go ahead and exit, just hit edit component, or you can hit rebuild. Now when we leave, these pipes have joined, and now this guy has a pipe going down the side. So to kind of continue, just do the same thing on this flange and add some piping, and we're going to go ahead and do that. Snap to him, check. Yep. And for this one, similar thing as before. Move this line up a little bit. Add a sketch, rough sketch of the piping that you want. And so this is going to be, I'm just going to end the pipe here, but this is where it'll go into the injector of the engine, and we'll have the second pipe going right here. And then this is where, if you want to, this is, with the Jet A and the liquid oxygen, I'd be a lot more careful with angles, especially liquid oxygen, but this is showing a 35-degree curve. Essentially, it's off this axis. So you shouldn't run into any issues. Usually issues come around 45 degrees. So we're going to go ahead and leave that guy. And do this one. Sweet. Alright, so then that is the pressurant line for the liquid oxygen, pressurant line for the Jet A right here, and now this is going to be the Jet A feed line into the injector, and then we're going to go ahead and add the liquid oxygen line into the injector. And again, this is going to be a very, very preliminary idea of where these pipings go, but there's going to be a lot more. There's going to be sensors coming out of here. There's going to be vent lines coming out of here too, expulsion paths and stuff like that. So this probably will end up looking a lot more complicated by the time we're getting closer to the actual building of this vehicle. Okay, sweet. There we go. Edit, leave. Okay, yeah, and so that's pretty much how you do the piping. Pretty cool. I really like this this feature. It's really nice. Makes it a lot easier than having to just do extruding a boss along a line and then having to do it that way. This way is kind of pretty automatic, and you can always change your root properties. You can change your thickness of your piping. You can change your diameter of it, internal diameter, all that kind of stuff. So that's going to be nice, especially once you create a rough model like this. You'll be able to change it however you want later on, so you won't have to go back and do it all over again. But pretty much for now, that's a great way to get you started. And if you need any help on the actual, if you need help imagining how this will come together, or if you need pictures on the vehicle itself, make sure to check the drive. That should have everything you need. Otherwise, this document in the drive as well should help. I'm just going to pull it up here. Yeah, so you're going to want this guy. This will tell you tank sizing based on the elliptical ends and all that, and it'll tell you some basic placement, and it'll tell you the distance between the two, the top end of the tank and the bottom end of the tank. So I'm going to sign off with that, and I'm going to wish you guys good luck, and I might have another episode or two in this pressure vessel design series, but I'll probably end up getting to other videos before that. I just needed to kind of go over this piping and routing because this is going to be really useful for the test stand as well. So good luck, guys. Peace.